Now, introducing Minor Wisdom Quintet.
One, two, a skittle-diddle-doo.
Minor Wisdom.
So I took some time away and I got my ducks in a row. You'll notice that I kind of left the pod world for just a few months right after I left Covenant, just to kind of, it was just overwhelming to kind of get interviews lined up and everything, and get my life lined up and get everything in order to figure out exactly what it is I'm doing now as a self-employed theater technician and designer and consultant and trainer and all of that stuff. And I've got to tell you, I'm not going to do this long introduction. A couple weeks ago, I recorded a 19-minute just like bleh. And then I thought, I shouldn't post it because I talked about, when I go into schools, I see this and that. And it was rather negative and stating things that I saw that were unsafe in schools. And I have done really, really well being self-employed so far, but I still have had a limited number of schools that I've been into, and I don't want to incriminate those people. I'd rather just kind of help them fix what it is that is wrong in their school and move on and go from school to school. I also, if I tell everybody what's wrong, you'll go and fix it and you won't hire me and pay me. You know what I'm saying? It's bad business plan. So I'm not going to do that, but I will tell you this. There are lots of issues in schools when it comes to lighting, safety issues mostly, and then just a lack of understanding what it is they need to make a show successful when it comes to lighting, right? A ton of these directors, actually all of these directors, I shouldn't say a ton, all of the directors in Texas theater education have a lot on their plate. And I want them to hire out for things that they don't know. And the people I've worked with thus far have been smart enough to recognize that they need to do that, right? Instead of just trying to figure it out within a short amount of time. I think that all of these directors over time will figure things out, right? And it's just a matter of getting their feet under them. And if they don't want to figure out lighting, audio, video, then call people, especially if you can afford it. Just do it. Why not? I thought, I don't think I'm going to go back to the classroom next year. I'm still on the fence. But I'm not sure, right? And here's the reason why. I've done really, really well over the past few months. Have I, been able to save up to afford a trip to Disney? No. Have I been able to feed my children and pay my mortgage and my car note? Yeah, I have. And that's what I want out of this. And what I think will happen, what I hope, being fully transparent, is that now that people know that I'm available and more than happy, actually way more than happy to come out to your school and help you, sometimes for much cheaper than I probably should charge, they might budget for me and expect me, or not expect me, but work me into their season. And I would love that. I would absolutely love it. I've had so much fun, not only A, helping students and teachers, B, helping schools get just a better system under them, and C, I've been able to spend time with my own girls. I get to take them to school. I get to make my own schedule. And sometimes I will say no to somebody or that I'm not available on a certain day because really I want to be able to go to my kids' school to see them in the little 5-minute show that they're doing, right? Mostly Eleanor. But it's just really nice. So all that said, the podcast is back, at least for now. And yeah, there might be another break, but I have put a few interviews in the can. This week I've got Jeff Davis. Jeff has a different story than a lot. He moved from LA. He's a California guy, and it was really fun to get to know him. I've gotten to know quite a few people now. I've still got some stuff lined up for interviewing, and I just I do miss getting to know people. I don't necessarily miss hunting people down. So here's what I'm going to do this go around with the podcast. You want to be on? Get a hold of me. And I would love to get to know you. If I already know you, I'm happy to put you on and we can talk about something else. We can talk about more. I don't know even, the best piece of advice I ever got from a mentor of mine named Esther Smith. She said that the reason her marriage worked, and her husband is deceased, Jimmy, but the reason her marriage worked is because they learned something new about each other almost every single day. And I say that because this podcast, even if I've had you on before, Mandy, Jay, Destiny, Tress Curzum, right? I've had them on multiple times, Amy, Wernig. Even if I've had you on, I clearly don't know you 100%. So hunt me down instead of me hunting you down. Message me. Send me an email, blake.miner@gmail.com. If you have my phone number, which I'm not going to put on this podcast, shoot me a text, give me a call, and let's talk. Let's put you on the record. I even had somebody, I'm not going to say who, maybe they'll be on at some point, that was on the podcast when I first started, almost one of my first interviews, actually. And that person approached me and said, why haven't you had me on the podcast? I said, I have had you on. Yeah, but you didn't really have me on. You didn't really know what you were doing. I didn't know what you wanted. You should have me on again. And so I'm going to have that person on again. Clearly you'll figure out who I'm talking about when I have them on. But my point is I'm tired of the hunt. So hunt me down and let's figure out a time to put you on because I would love to do it. So a couple of other things real fast. I want to send my condolences to Charles Jeffrey's family. He was on in the early part of this podcast too in 2020. And just a legend in the world of theater education. Texas theater had an impact on a lot of people. Clearly, you can tell based on all of the posts that were on social media and just beyond that. And so, if you want to hear Charles speak, go back in the archives into 2020 and you can hear his story. But it's not about that. It's just cool that I've got it on record. But my condolences to his family, his friends, people that he impacted immensely. There's no good way to follow that, but I do have to shout out Mel Edwards and her podcast. It is only on Spotify right now, whatever, Mel, but I do want to shout that out. It's a great podcast, and we every once in a while will go back and forth with this. I'm like, hey, I've encountered this. You should put it on the podcast because she has bigger balls than I do. So that's something she's really good at kind of putting things out there that says, hey, you should really think about doing it like this and like that. I'm not as bold or as well versed as she is when it comes to that. But I highly encourage you to check that podcast out. And then finally, we are in UIL season, and best of breaking legs to everybody that's out there. I just contest managed this past week for my first contest of the season. This coming week, I'll be sort of a tech director at a contest, and then I've got 4 more contests to manage, and having a ball doing it. They are. I will never adjudicate. No way. You could not pay me enough to adjudicate, and it's because it's just hard, and my attention span is not there. But I absolutely love contest managing, and one director this past week said, we're going to have you back because you didn't add stress to the contest. We've had contest managers that add stress to it, and that's not my job. Your job is to make things easy, make things run smoothly. That's it, right? I learned from the best. Shout out to Jay. I've talked enough. If you want to get to know maybe what it is about your space that you should look at and fix and reconsider, whatever, let me know. Reach out. Blake.miner@gmail.com, blakeminer.com, my website. If you have my number, shoot me a text. If not, send me a message. Send me a message on Facebook. But I want to come help you. I absolutely love it. It is exactly what I want to be doing. And that's it. Enjoy the interview this week with Mr. Jeff Davis.
I've been teaching theater for, I think this is my 7th year. And I've been with the Leander School District for that entire time. Taught a couple years at another campus in our district, and then shifted over to Vandergrift, which is a great, an awesome public school in Austin. But my story of how I got here is, I think, a bit different than a lot of other theater teachers. I do have a degree in theater, and then I completely did not use it for about 10 years. And then just kind of fell into this in an interesting way. But I guess if I want to go like really, really far back here, I'm definitely one of those like theater kids. Like I'm the stereotypical theater nerd. That's who I was in high school. And that's I attribute that to my parents, because they kind of saw that I had an interest in the arts and sort of fostered that. I also think it's kind of funny that their first date was to go see Camelot in Los Angeles. My dad bought 2 tickets, one for him and one for his then girlfriend, and then she broke up with him on, I think, the day that they were supposed to go see the show. So he called my mom up and said, "Hey, I don't know what you're doing in a couple hours, but if you want to go see Camelot, I've got a ticket." And she said yes, and that was their first date. So yeah, so I feel like theater's just like been a part of my family and a part of my of just how I grew up. They kind of raised me on like Rodgers and Hammerstein shows, and took me to see Phantom when I was 5 years old. I was definitely the youngest person in the audience when I went and saw Phantom for the first time. And I've just always loved theater and loved the arts. And when I was in high school, I thought I wanted to be a performer. I really enjoyed acting. But my high school had an IB theater program, which is a course that I now teach, which is really kind of fun. But part of the IB theater program, it's an international program that's very project based, and part of that involves doing a directing project where you come up with a directing proposal for a show. And to kind of prepare us for that, my teacher gave all of the IB theater students an opportunity to direct a scene from any show of their choice for like a showcase thing. And it could be like 10-15 minutes long, like a sizable chunk of whatever show you picked. And I picked A Doll's House, which is a very meaty show that I've just very recently revisited. I just closed a production of it a couple weeks ago. But that really made me think like, whoa, I really enjoy directing more than I enjoy performing. And it hit me like, even when I was a 17-year-old kid, and like it hit me that the thing that I enjoyed the most about performing was all of the preparation that comes before it, like really getting into like the meat and potatoes of the show, and understanding your character and their psychology and their motivations and how those interact with the other characters that are their scene partners. And as a director, you get to do that for every character and for the entire show and for the show's relationship to the audience, like everything. You get to really dissect the show and put it back together, and that's something that I really enjoyed. And I started to pivot from I want to be a performer to I want to be a director. And I applied to a couple of theater schools in California where I grew up. One of those was UCLA, and UCLA's theater program is very competitive. They make everyone audition, which is not uncommon for theater programs. But even for the tech and directing programs, you had to go in and show your work and do an interview. And I went in for my interview, and it's a brief, 15-minute interview with a professor of the directing program. And this man, sat down with me and asked me like what made me want to direct. And I shared with him, the story about A Doll's House and my opportunity to direct a scene from it. And he was impressed that I picked something like A Doll's House as a high schooler. And he asked me, what made you, what appealed to you about A Doll's House? And I said, I just think it's so interesting that one, it still is timely, like it still holds up, even though it's over 100 years old. But I also really enjoyed the story about the show and how controversial it was at the time, and how it was so controversial that Henrik Ibsen had to write a different ending to it. And this man looks at me and like kind of does the head tilt and the kind of look and says, I didn't know there was an alternate ending. And I don't know what compelled me to do this that day, but I brought my script with me. And my script had an appendix in it that had the alternate ending, which is seriously just the last page of dialogue is changed. And I was like, well, if you want to take a look at it, I've got it right here. And I showed him, and he was like, just kind of floored that there was something about this show that he didn't know. And I'm pretty sure that's what ended up getting me into UCLA. He ended up being one of my directing professors, and I really attribute that show to a lot of stuff with my career. But moving forward from that, I mean, UCLA was a fantastic place to study. It was great for me because I was an hour away from home, so I still maintained a great relationship with my family and friends, which I still have. But it also was far enough away that I could be my own person, and it really was a fantastic theater school. Great professors, great students that I still maintain relationships with, a lot of them, and a lot of them are now working in this industry. But it was, it did kind of hit me like in my junior year that, oh man, I'm about to graduate and I want to be a director, and there's just not that many jobs in directing. And what the heck am I going to do? And when I get out into the real world. And as I'm kind of thinking this, there was one night where I was studying for finals and pulling an all-nighter, and ordered a pizza at like 10 o'clock at night. And, the pizza delivery guy shows up, and he's one of the theater classmates that graduated the year before me. And like, this guy was super talented, and now he's, delivering pizzas. So I remember calling my parents again at 10 o'clock at night, sobbing, like crying my eyes out as I'm sitting on the floor of my apartment eating a large pizza by myself. And I'm just like, I probably sounded completely unintelligible to them, but I remember saying to them, I'm going to end up being a pizza delivery man. And that's I just saw my future tonight. And I don't what am I going to do? So then the next morning, my dad called me and was like, I think you need to pivot. And you are so smart and you have a great mind for business. I think you need to go into something that's business related. And I was like, yeah, Dad, I don't want to do something where it's like the same stuff every day. I don't want to be sitting behind a desk all day. That doesn't sound like me. And he's like, well, what about human resources? Like, go into something like that where, you're dealing with problems, you're dealing with people, and every day is not, not the same. And this was one of the times where I actually listened to my dad and his advice. And I was like, okay, well, let me look into that. And UCLA had this program called UCLA Extension, which was a certification program in different areas. And one of them was human resources. So I got a certification in HR, and that became my career path right after graduation. So I ended up being more in like the recruiting end of human resources, and worked for about 10 years in that space. It from doing, corporate recruiting to doing some recruiting for like actual, headhunting and recruiting firms. And I was good at it, but it just like, it's soul crushing at times. It gets very competitive. It just was not the right environment for me. And like at the same time, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, I spent so much time and energy and money getting this degree in theater that I'm really proud of, but I'm not using it. And I just wasn't fulfilled at all. And then I ended up moving here to Austin after I met my now husband. We started dating in Los Angeles. And then a couple weeks into us dating, he tells me that, hey, I might get this promotion at work, but if I apply to it, the job's in Austin, it's not here. And of course, I'm thinking like a recruiter. I'm thinking, well, you're going to have to interview for it. Who knows who else is going to interview for it? You're just going to kick yourself in the pants if you don't, try and don't interview. So go for it. And then we figure out what happens with us if you get it. So then a week later, he's like, yeah, I got it. Now what? And so I ended up moving to Austin. Oh God. Okay. So we started dating the day after Valentine's Day, and we ended up moving here at the end of May that year. So it was only a couple of months that we had been together before we moved out here. And immediately I was like, I need to check out the theater scene here. I need to see what's going on in the theater community. And I started writing for Broadway World as a Austin theater critic, and made a lot of friends in the theater community through that. And one of them came up to me one time and was like, hey, I know you've got this degree in theater and a specialty in directing. I'm trying to start up a new theater company and we need someone to direct our first show. Do you want to do it? And I was like, heck yeah, I want to do that. And their company used a high school space as their space and utilized high school students as their crew. And it was just a lot of fun. We did a bunch of shows in that space together, and I got really close to the high school students that were working on our shows with us. And one day, one of them reaches out to me and says, "Hey, our theater teacher just is taking a leave of absence for mental health. I think it was mental health issues. I don't know exactly what the situation was." But he says, do you have a teaching credential? Because they're looking for a long-term sub. And I was like, no, I don't. But damn, I wish I did, because that would be fun to like work with, in this space every day. And at that point, I was not working in recruiting anymore. I was unemployed and unhappy and was looking for, what the heck's next for me. So I looked into getting a teaching credential and ended up finding an awesome program in Austin for that, and got my my certification in theater teaching. And part of that certification program was involved a 2-week internship at a local public school. So my internship ended up being at Leander High School under Linda Major and her then tech director, Chuck Harris, and learned a lot and immediately bonded with their student body, and they had amazing students. And shortly after the internship, I get a call from Linda saying, Chuck's going to be leaving at the end of this year. I'm going to need a new tech director. The job's not even posted yet, but you better apply to it. I said, okay. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, like, tech and design is not really what I studied. I mean, I took a few design classes at UCLA, kind of like intro to set design, intro to lighting design, just some basics, but that's not really my comfort zone. But, a job is a job. Yeah, I'm going to apply to this and see, see what happens. And maybe I don't get it, but maybe there's something else, in somewhere else in the district that might be a good fit. So I interviewed, I sent in a really god awful portfolio of design work because at that point I was not a good designer. I think I'm much better at design now, 7 years in, than I was then, but it was good enough to get me the job. So so I took the job, and I was the tech director over at Leander High School for 3 years and learned a lot. It was a lot of trial by fire and a lot of learning on the job. We did, Linda Major, anyone that works in the theater as a theater teacher in Austin probably knows her name because she'd done this for, I think, almost 40 years by the time she retired. But she was very particular and very detail oriented in how she wanted her shows to look and feel, and really, really pushed me to always like do more and do better and just kind of like throw more stuff on stage. Bigger is better was kind of her thing. And I'm glad I had that as my first head director that I was working under, because it pushed me so far out of my comfort zone, because I was used to working with a community theater where it's like you had a $2,000 budget and you're going to stretch that budget as far as it will go, and you're going to do things with small sets, small limited sets, limited costumes, because resources were limited. And here I am working with someone who's like, no, give me everything you got. And our first show first musical that we did together was Addams Family, which is a giant show and a really fun one to design. But I walked into that thinking like, oh my god, I've never designed a set this big. I've never designed a set for a 50-foot wide space. Like this is really not at all what I'm comfortable with. But we pulled it off, and I really attribute the students and the parents over there for that. We had incredible students and parents that were like, whatever you need to get this done, we're here to support you. We're here to help. So, we do like Saturday build days, and parents and siblings and, friends and neighbors would come and help out. But we came up with a really incredible set for that show. And I think that was like the show that made me think, okay, I can do this and I can do this long term. Because until then, I was kind of thinking like, this job is just like the stepping stone to, a theater teacher job where I'm more focused on teaching acting and directing productions and not doing the design work. And then that show kind of made me like appreciate what I have as a designer more, and really made me enjoy designing a lot more. So I'm trying to think of other shows that we did at Leander that were really challenging and fun. We did Thoroughly Modern Millie, which won I think they were then titled the Gatsmas over here in Austin. And my set for that one, I think, got a nomination. My set for Addams Family got a nomination as well. So, and then after that, we did Mary Poppins, which is a show I hope I never have to revisit. That show is a beast. If you are a high school theater teacher that's thinking of doing Mary Poppins, think real hard, because it's a fun show. It made us a lot of money, but it is hard to do that show and do it well. But right after Mary Poppins, COVID hit. So we were very, very lucky that, our show was, I think, the end of January, beginning of February. And then, so just a couple months later, everything shut down. And I know that my high school theater, like, they had to cancel their show because of COVID. And then during the beginning of COVID, I found out that the tech director at Vandergrift was leaving, and I had become really close friends over the last couple of years with the head director over there. And I was thinking, it might be time for a change. Vandergrift also had a great reputation for having an incredible, just an incredible campus community and a great student body and a great booster club for their theater program. And it also was a 3-person team instead of a 2-person team, which changes things a lot in a very positive way, I think. So it was really appealing to, even though it was kind of a lateral move, it was the same exact job title in the same district, same pay. It was a really attractive move for those reasons. So I applied to that and got it. And I've been at Vandergrift now this is my 4th year, and really, really proud of the work that I've done there. And really, I've had a lot of fun working in that space. The other kind of fun thing with Vandergrift that I didn't have at Leander is I'm also the auditorium manager over at Vandergrift. And the auditorium is my classroom space, which it wasn't at Leander. So there's a lot of stuff in that job where, I'm not just responsible for designing productions, but I'm also kind of looking at the space and thinking like, well, how can we make this space better for us and everyone else that uses it? So, we've done a few upgrades to the space in the time that I've been there. Our sound system is a lot better than it was when I first walked in. We've got a few new bells and whistles in terms of lighting that we didn't have when I first got there. But that's one of the things that I really enjoy is like looking at what's now on the market in terms of the technology that's available to us and bringing that in and exposing the students to that and getting them to play with those things. And like there's a lot of like me learning along with the students because technology keeps changing at such a crazy pace. When I was in college, I don't think short throw projectors were a thing. And now they're, everywhere, and projection mapping is everywhere. I know moving lights and LEDs were a thing when I was in college, but they were so ridiculously expensive. We didn't have those, and now they're everywhere. So, getting to train students on how to use stuff like that is just really kind of fun, but it's also something where it's like I have to teach myself before I can teach them because no one taught me this stuff in college because it wasn't really, useful yet. It really wasn't feasible yet. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about what I do is that it is, this, even though this is an art form that's been around for thousands of years, it's constantly changing. And the types of shows that high schools do today are, I think, far more challenging than the shows that I got to do when I was in high school, because the technology on Broadway keeps changing. And then, we're trying to emulate that in our spaces. And we just did Legally Blonde, which I think is a great example of this. One of the things that I do in my process when I start designing a show is I'll read the script. If it's a musical, I'll read the script, but I'll also try to find the score, including all of the like set change music. So I literally time the set change music. And I think like, okay, how many seconds do I actually have for this transition? And that kind of dictates how much stuff I can put on the stage. And whether it's going to fly in, whether it's going to roll on, how does it get on and off the stage? And I get Legally Blonde, and the beautiful thing with Legally Blonde is there's that awesome pro shot of the Broadway production. So I watched the Broadway production and I timed all of the set change music, and I was like, there's no set change music except for maybe 3 spots. Like every scene just bleeds into the next scene with no transition. There's no spot for a blackout. There's nothing in a lot of these moments in Legally Blonde. And then it hit me that Legally Blonde was one of the first shows on Broadway, I think, to use automated scenery. So everything was computerized, everything tracked on and off seamlessly. Things came out of the ground, like all of these things that, you know, high schools just aren't able to do. And then when they licensed the show, they weren't nice enough to, you know, hey, let's give you some optional set change music here between these scenes. So that was like one that was a really interesting challenge to navigate with the students. And I think we did a great job at like figuring out how to mask scene transitions and do things in, you know, mid scene without really being noticed. But that was a really, really tricky one, and one that I'm kind of glad we did, because I think it's made my students sort of think about what they do a little bit differently, and you know, figure out how to, you know, problem solve things like that. I think is really a valuable skill. So
yeah, that last thing you said about I want to talk more about that in a little bit, about the set change music thing, because that's like that was a big mic drop right there, because I think that's people are always or I say always, that's a hyperbole, but I do get a lot of questions about like focus more on the person's process. So I do want to touch on that a little bit, but I want to go back. One funny thing is my wife and I have a similar story to how you and your husband started dating.
Oh, really?
A different situation, but similar in that a guy turned her down, and then she MySpace messaged me like I think either that same day or the next day for a New Year's party, and was like, "Hey, just shot in the dark."
So cool.
I didn't know that I was playing B until later, right? But it's just funny how like, yeah, and I was just like, yeah, sure, whatever, and then we went on a date, and here we are, you know, 2 kids and 14 years later. So 14 blissful married years, wonderful, great. Just kidding. Yeah, they're all great. But I just thought I'd throw that out there. So
yeah, it's so funny.
You know, Leander it has a notoriety for being such a hard place to get into because nobody wants to leave. You know, it's such a great district. It has a great reputation of being such a great district that, like you with Linda Major, who I've had on this podcast, you either have to wait for somebody to retire like Linda, or, you know, like Paul Davis was in Leander.
He was there for what, 10 years?
Yeah, and like you know, he got the PVA. You know, it's like either you get bigger and better, or you retire, or you die, and like it's, you know, and that's how you leave Leander. There's nobody leaving Leander because they're just upset with something or another. You know, it's like or very few and far between. So good on you for kind of like,
I think I just lucked out, and I was looking at the right time.
Yeah.
You know, because I think that was the only theater. I might have been the only theater teacher that entered that district that year. I could be wrong, but I think I was the only new hire into the theater community in Leander ISD that year.
Yeah.
So and I think most years after me, it's been 1 or 2 people every year, if that, that have entered the district.
Yeah, it's not an easy place to get into, which is good. It's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Good problem for them. When you were younger, because you mentioned how your parents kind of helped cultivate your theatrical, you know, desires or whatever with musicals, and you talked a lot about musical type things. Do you remember the first play you saw and like kind of how it compared to, you know, because musicals are so big and body, and then you go see a play, and you talked about all your sort of infatuation with Ibsen, or with the Doll's House, not necessarily Ibsen, but, so do you remember that experience?
God, that's a good question. I don't, because the musicals, I mean, the musicals are the ones that I remember the most, because my mom took me to see Wizard of Oz when I was like 3. And then they took me to see Phantom of the Opera when I was 5, because I begged them to take me. Um, and those ones really stick out because it was like this, the spectacle and the storytelling is like, you know, really like even to a young kid was like, wow, these people can create this world and tell the story in such a limited space. But in terms of plays, yeah, I'm racking my brain right now trying to remember what the first play was that I saw, and I'm struggling to remember. Yeah.
Do you think it was high school? I mean, do you think it was like your high school experience, or
no, I think it had to have been before high school, but I'm just running maybe like a Christmas Carol.
Okay.
Yeah, that might have been it. Like, because I remember when I was in like 5th grade, 6th grade, we did a field trip to see a non-musical production of A Christmas Carol, which was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like that one sticks out in my head. Yeah, it probably was that. I'm guessing it was that because my parents aren't real big like playgoers. They're definitely more musical theater inclined. I think I've grown to be both. Like I love going to see plays, but I think there are also far more musicals around, and musicals tend to be more popular and make more money. So more theater companies go in that direction typically.
Yeah.
Although Austin, I feel like there are a lot of theater companies here that, you know, do some great, you know, plays and a lot of great dramatic work.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Austin's a great spot for
it
that
really
kind
is.
of stuff. Yeah. So you broke down your directing and you elaborated on that with the UCLA chat. But have you ever started your process in directing a show or breaking down the script and analyzing each character one by one and realize you actually don't like the script?
I've been really fortunate where I think every show that I've either picked or been asked to do, I've really enjoyed the text. I have not run into that problem. But I have run into the problem where like you go in thinking the concept is going to be this, the overall feel of the show is going to be this. And then as you start to work with the text and work with the actors, you realize, oh no, this is a completely different production or a completely different story than what I had in my head. And sometimes I see a lot of directors like resist that. And I think it eventually blows up in their face. I'm more of the mindset of like, if my actors and my rehearsal process is telling me to go in this direction, go in that direction. Yeah, you've got to let the show be whatever it wants to be instead of forcing it to be something else.
Right.
And there have been a few shows where like I've made, you know, big changes in blocking or big changes in just kind of the look and feel of the show because I realized, you know, oh, this is different than what I had initially anticipated. I'm even revisiting A Doll's House recently, which I just did with my students. The first table read, I was like, there's actually some comedy in this script that people don't really talk about. And I was like, guys, we got to mind the comedy because that makes the ending hit even harder.
Yeah.
That, you know, you're letting the audience expect that like, oh, things are going to, you know, if they're not familiar with the show, which a lot of people, I know a lot of people are, but a lot of people aren't.
Spoiler alert. Yeah.
You know, things don't exactly end up happily for Nora. But, you know, I wanted the audience that didn't know the show, you know, going in to think like, oh, well, it had such a light tone in the first scene, everything's going to end up okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, and we also talked about like, okay, with Doll's House, everyone talks about that last scene, but that last scene is 20 minutes of a 2-hour show.
Right.
You have to understand what, you know, all of that lead up and why it's important and how it's important. And, you know, the comedy was actually a big piece of that. And one of the things that we got a lot of feedback from the audience on that, from the people that did know the show, was like, oh, I forgot that there was actually, you know, some one-liners in there and some funny bits, and like, you know, so it did kind of enhance the show, but that's not the show that I walked in thinking that we were going to do. I thought we were going to do a very serious drama, and I mean, it still was serious when it needed to be, but it was light when it needed to be that too.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect that going in.
Right. That's good. Yeah. You have very good answers. You don't waste words, but that's probably your human resources side of things. But
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
do you have a different type of because typically theater educators and human resources, they do not get along, right? Do you have when I call my cable provider or my wireless, Wi-Fi provider, and they put me through the whole rigmarole of, have you tried unplugging it and plugging back, that
Right.
whole stuff, and I'm like, yes, I'm a grown man, like I know that you have to do that, right? As we all
Right.
do now. Do you have that kind of relationship with human resources where if you call them, you say, hey, before we start, I did this for a decade. So,
I've been very blessed that I have not had to have, I think, any conversations with human resources since I've started work at Leander. But I do think like it has helped me with the way I navigate things with my school admin.
Yeah.
And I think we, as theater educators, like theater and English and history, I feel are the areas in public education right now, and science to a certain degree too, that like what we say and how we say it is like is under scrutiny all the time. And the types of shows that we do with kids and the types of shows that we're putting out in front of the community, people are going to have an opinion on every single thing that you put up on that stage and every word that is said on that stage. And I'm very cognizant of that, but I'm also someone that takes the approach of like, I work with high schoolers. They're familiar with these types of themes. They're familiar with this type of material. They say and do a lot of things that are probably worse than things that the characters in our shows are saying and doing, or they know someone that has, so I'm not nearly as conservative in some of those ways as I think some people in the community are, but I'm also very aware of like, you don't want to piss off certain people in certain demographics. And I think the human resources education that I have has made me really good at kind of spotting those areas and addressing them with my school administrators in a really productive way. Like with Doll's House, we actually did Doll's House and Doll's House Part 2 in rep with each other. And if you're familiar with the Doll's House Part 2, it's very modern in its language, it's comedy, and it's, there are a few 4-letter words in that script, and they're all there for comedic effect. Like you can take the words out and it's not going to affect the story or the characters at all. But there were some that I was like, man, I really want to keep this word in because it's just not as funny if we can't say shit. Like the SHIT word was the one that I was like really fighting for. And the script had 7 instances of that word and 7 instances of the F word. And I remember walking into my assistant principal's office, and thank God I have an assistant principal that is a fellow theater major. Like he understands this stuff too, in a way that's really productive for us. But I walked into his office and I'm like, so this script is great, but here's the issue. I was like, there's 7 F words, there's 7 S words. Obviously, we're gonna take the F words out because that's not even a battle that I want to fight. But I was like, how many shits can you give me? Was the question I asked. And he's like, well, how many do you need? And I was like, I would love to keep all of them, but I know that's not possible. I'd really love to fight for 3. Here are the 3. Here's why. And I showed him like the page of the text where I wanted to keep them. And he looked at it and laughed and was like, yeah, that's funny. Like, you can't change that punchline. Like, it's got to stay. He's like, it's not being directed at a person. Like, just, I don't think it's going to be an issue. Keep it. And I mean, I've thought that was going to be a much longer discussion, but I think because I went in with this sort of like, hey, I know we can't get away with this. I know we can't get away with this. How far can I tiptoe up to the line? Like, I think going in with that kind of mindset and that compromise made that a much easier conversation. And to my knowledge, we never got any complaints or anything about it. So
I'll send something anonymously or something.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean, I think even like, was it the FCC allows a show to have 3 shits? There's some rule about that, like, because I'm a big, as you can see behind me, I'm a big wrestling fan,
right?
So
they sometimes have some colorful language.
Yeah, and so there are some wrestling organizations that are on TV and they drop a couple curse words, and I think that, like, there have been stories in the media about so and so was mad at so and so because they used up one of their shits.
That's funny.
Because they were planning on saying it or something like that. Right. Yeah. So, which could or could not be true, but I think it's kind of a funny story. Have before you moved to Austin with your husband, or at that time boyfriend, but had you ever been to Austin and or Texas?
No.
Okay.
So I moved here. I was out. No, actually, I take that back. I was here for a conference in Dallas once.
Okay.
And it was like your whole day is packed in this hotel kind of thing. So I never really got to explore the city. I was like stuck in a Hilton or something.
Yeah.
For a whole, a long weekend. So yeah, that was the extent of it. So I moved here sight unseen, and we drove our cars separate. Like we came at the same time, but we were, we both wanted to bring our cars from California, so we didn't have to buy a new car here. So we're each, driving our cars separately. It was a really interesting journey to get out here. We took 3 days to drive from California to Austin, and stopped in, I think, New Mexico along the way, and somewhere in West Texas along the way. And but I had not moved. I had not been to Austin, visited Austin. We hadn't even seen the apartment that we ended up moving into. My husband had a friend out here that looked at the apartment for us and was like, if I had or looked at a few apartments for us. I was like, if I had to pick one, it would be this one. And we're like, cool, we'll sign a lease. It was crazy. But it all worked out, and we stayed in that apartment for years. And, I fell in love with Austin immediately. And, I don't see us ever moving out of this town. It's a great place to be.
Yeah, I won't preach it from the mountaintops, but a lot of Austinites are angry that a lot of Californians are moving to Austin.
I try to keep that a little hush hush that I'm not originally from here.
No Bruins tattoos on your forehead or anything like that.
No.
Yeah. So speaking of Bruins, so as we kind of talked off mic, we have turns out we have a mutual friend from UCLA, and I'll be completely honest, when I saw that you went to UCLA, I was like, let me call Eric and find out if he knows you, but I don't think he does because he went to the film school. And then he goes, yeah, I do know Jeff. And that's when I realized, I've been best friends with Eric for 20 years now. And for this whole time thought he went to film school and just, but whatever.
Yeah, it was theater.
Yeah.
Theater, film, and television was all in one little spot on that campus.
But the question really is like, does UCLA get kind of I know people love UCLA and it's like a destination and it's always been a great school to go to, but do they get a bad rap for theater because people just assume LA, California, it's right near USC, film, do people mistake
I don't
it
think
to be a
so.
film school?
Yeah, I think it still has a pretty good reputation for theater, and I granted I've kind of lost touch with the campus over the years.
Sure.
I'm sure everyone that was my professor is now retired because it's been 20 some years.
Right.
But I I mean, a lot of my classmates are now working in the industry. I think the caliber of the productions that we were able to put on was pretty stellar. Um, but yeah, I think we always felt a little overshadowed by film and television, because it's LA, and we were part of the School of Theater, Film, and Television, and I do think theater got overlooked a little bit in terms of that entire school. But that said, I think the caliber of the professors that we had and the education that we got was pretty awesome. So
Right.
I'm pleased with my decision to go there. But at the same time, like, I don't know. I think the theater schools, like, there's always like, okay, NYU's great, but Juilliard, or Juilliard's great, but
Yeah, right.
look
Sure.
at Michigan. Yeah, there's always another handful of schools that are doing exactly what your school's doing, as good or better
Right.
than, but ultimately it's like a degree is a degree.
Yeah.
And I think if you're good at this and you're passionate about it, everything's gonna fall into place the way it needs to. And like, I think for me, like, maybe I needed to go on that 10-year journey of going through a completely different career,
Right.
only to come back into this. I think it's made me appreciate what I do a lot more.
Right.
And I think it's made me enjoy it a lot more.
So I've got a few more questions for you, and then I'm going to get you out of
Yeah.
here. First of all, have you ever had to tell somebody what a Bruin is? Like, do they not
I
know?
have.
Yeah. They don't know it's a bear.
No one knows.
Yeah. Okay.
I've had to have that conversation with several of my students, because there's a little, my campus does this thing where they make little signs of, like, your name and what school you went
Right.
to, and what the heck is a Bruin?
Yeah.
What? Because it's got our, and then I've had to explain it.
Yeah. Anyway. All right. But so when you talk about your set change music technique, right? And then
Yeah.
I've got two more questions after that. But so with that, like, what made you decide that? Like, when did you figure out that was part of your sort of
Honestly, it was Addams Family. As soon as I did that show, and that was the first musical I ever designed a set for, and that one's a beast of a show. And that script, first of all, every scene of that script is like a room in the house, another room in the house, yet another room in the house. So my first production meeting with Linda Major on that, I sat her down and I was like, how many freaking rooms of this house do we actually need to see? Like, can they please go back to some rooms occasionally? And we decided, if we're gonna spend a lot of time and money on this great hall set, a lot of these other rooms in the house are going to be the great hall, like the main entry foyer of the house. So, like, that's one of the things that I try to do too, is like pare down the set if you can, like repeat locations or flip things around to be other locations, which honestly is a technique that, like, your Broadway tours, your Broadway shows do this all the time, where you'll see a set piece come out and it's something that's already been on stage, but it's redressed or it's turned around or it's somehow transformed. I do that a lot because it saves storage space backstage, and there's always, we always need more storage space. But the set change music thing was something that I learned off of Addams Family, was that if you're doing your job right, the audience doesn't notice the set changes, but they're gonna notice it if they drag on, because you've gone past the set change music, or you've had to loop the set change music. And so I seriously make a spreadsheet of the transitions and how long I have for each one. And that really helps me kind of figure out, like, oh, okay, well, if this is supposed to be a 10-second thing, that better be a drop that I can fly in and out, because that's going to take no time.
Right.
If I've got 25 seconds, well, then I can do a really, I can roll some big pieces on and off, and it's going to look and sound fine.
Right.
but it really does get you to like understand kind of the way the show is meant to run, and like how the original team sort of conceived it to flow. And that really helps. Like once I understand that, the design just kind of takes off for me.
I bet your music director appreciates all of that, but
yeah, I think probably.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever had to ask a music director to give me additional set change music
to vamp,
except for that first show, except for Addams Family.
Yeah,
because I didn't know to do this yet.
Right, smart. Yeah, that's very smart. So, so that leads me into the question about tech. So, you're not a tech director by trade. You've learned things, and
right.
I don't know you very well other than this hour-long conversation, but you seem to have a good theater mind and sort of understand what you need to do in order to be the best. What is it that you did? Because Mel Edwards and I talk about this constantly, almost daily, about like these idiots out here doing this and that and hanging flats with shoestrings and all these kind of stuff. If you only knew how much crap Mel and I talked about people, what is it that you like? Where did you figure out? I don't know how to necessarily word this question. And typically, I'm pretty good at this, but where do you kind of draw your line of like, I can't just hang things in the air. I don't know. I'm not someone that took rigging classes, or I can't necessarily put this much weight on this platform because this caster is not rated. Where did you learn that kind of stuff? Is that just trial and error? Or is that?
I mean, some of it is, but a lot of it is. I mean, I'm not afraid to admit what I don't know and ask other people for help or look things up. And I mean, in terms of rigging, like rigging is one of the things that like I love flying set pieces, but at the same time, it's one of the most dangerous things that you can do. I mean, you're suspending several hundred pounds of stuff over your actors' heads,
right?
And like it's a liability thing. Like I want to make sure that we're doing stuff like that correctly. And there's so many resources out there, so many people that know how to do this, that make a living out of doing just that. So, I mean, I will fully admit what I don't know and look it up. That's one thing. I mean, I bounce ideas off of other tech directors a lot. Or if I see something that someone's done that's really cool and something that I've never done before, I'll reach out to them and be like, walk me through how you did that, because I want to, even if it's something that like I don't think I'm going to need for a show that's coming up, I'm like, okay, I still want to know how this was done because it might be useful down the line. I mean, Mel Edwards, I think, is a great example of that, because I know she made like her own LED strip lights and embedded them into a set. And I was like, that's not something that I need on any show in the near future. Like anything that is on my docket right now of things that I'm working on. But my gosh, that's a cool effect, and I'm going to use it at some point. So I want to know how it's done. And that's I'm always learning new stuff, and I feel like every show presents a new set of challenges and a new requirement in terms of design that other ones haven't. And it's just, that's part of the fun for me, is like figuring out, okay, well, what in my bag of tricks is going to work, and what new stuff do I need to add to that bag of tricks to make this show work the way it needs to work.
Yeah, I love that answer too. So you've done a great job. So let's see how I can screw you up on this. This is the last question. So you didn't grow up anywhere near the UIL world, right? The One Act Play world. So and this will come out during One Act season. Yeah. So I kind of want to know from you a little bit about your story of like how that was introduced to you, how you felt about it. I don't need to know how you feel about it now, if unless it's positive, but don't want to get you in trouble. But I want to explain to me how, because Linda Major is, part of the pun, but a major player in the
Oh,
UIL
absolutely.
game, right? So
Yeah.
so her introducing it to you, and my introduction was really Pam Wilson. I
Mhm.
worked a year with a gentleman named Brandon Tiarina, but he was kind of new too at the time. But Pam Wilson, who at the time was also a big like we're going to do this, and we made it to region twice. I mean, that was my introduction, and so it was a slap in the face. And here's competitive theater for you. What was that kind of that like? And
Yeah.
that's how I'll get you out of here.
So that internship that I mentioned earlier happened to be right in the middle of UIL season that year. And it was the year after Linda made it all the way to state with Picnic, and they were doing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and like even though it really wasn't required of my internship for me to like stay for those after school rehearsals those 2 weeks as they were prepping for their first competition, I did, because I just wanted to see like, well, what the heck is this process like, and like what's the big deal about UIL, because it is very different. That, I mean, we didn't do anything like that in California. So, and we had like acting festivals and different things, but nothing to that scale where you're doing really a full show that you're traveling with and setting up in 7 minutes. And it was I feel really blessed that my internship was during that season and I could see how that worked. And I was there at the time, the time in the process where blocking was done but was still being refined a little bit. Tech was done but was still being refined a little bit. They were timing their setup and teardown and making sure that it was going to stay under that 7 minute timeline. And like, I got to see the process, I think, at like the pivotal point in the UIL process, like right before you go to contest. So my first year teaching, when we did Children's Hour, like I walked into Children's Hour being like, okay, I have a really good understanding of what this looks like until we get to contest. I didn't have any idea what a contest looked like. But I had a really good understanding of like, everything has to be portable. Everything has to be, everything has to like, interlock in some way or be weighted in some way, or, like, Linda also gave me like the UIL handbook, I believe, during the internship. So I like looked over that and I was like, there are some weird rules here, but okay. Like there's a lot of interesting constraints that you have to work in under. And, I think that really, really helped being an intern during that process. And I feel like I even went to one of their clinics during my internship too, which really, put things into perspective a lot.
So has that changed how you feel about theater at all?
Yes and no. I mean, I feel like the UIL is a great teaching tool for our students, because I think a lot of times our students think that theater has to be like crazy big and extravagant because that's what they see when the Broadway tours come through. And I love that Broadway shows are now being filmed and broadcast, but like that's not, that's usually our students' exposure to a lot of our students' exposure to the theater is like, oh, I watched Hamilton on Disney Plus, and it's like, great, good for you, but not every show is that big, and you don't need all of that stuff to tell a story. And sometimes you can do some really incredible things in a 7 minute setup and teardown. And I mean, I've seen some wildly creative UIL shows that utilize. I just love it when like people use that, let's be honest, ugly UIL set. It's not
absolutely
an attractive set, but they create something gorgeous and expensive looking out of these, gray boxes and pillars and stairs. And like, it's just, I think it does kind of change. It has changed my idea of like what high school theater can be. And it really is impressive to me. Like these students can go into a space that they've never been into before, rehearse in there for an hour and put on a professional quality show. It really is amazing when you think about it in that perspective. And like, I have so much respect for our kids and what they're able to do as, you know, young artists at the beginning of their careers. It's really incredible.
Minor wisdom.